Welcome to this year's Texas Signing Day Special Defensive Edition. We're going to go through every single Texas signee that just signed about a couple weeks ago at this point, and just kind of talk about their upside at Texas, what I think they're good at, what I think they're going to improve at the next level. And of course, this is my opinion. You guys feel free to disagree. I actually encourage you guys to disagree since you guys are a lot more laser focused on just Texas football than I am. I do think you'll have some valuable insight to these players that they're bringing in. But as always, yeah, please reach out. Let me know what you think about these guys. We're going to get the offensive version up of this. You know, I usually use this to kind of promote the channel. I'll be like, oh, if this gets enough likes or enough comments, I'll make sure to do the offensive version of this. I'm going to do Texas's offense just because I think there's so much talent, especially the quarterback. I am so excited about Diabell, but we're not talking about Diabell today. We're going to talk about the Texas defensive signees. As always, you guys let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. First player we'll watch today is James Johnson. He's a 6'2.5", 285-pound defensive lineman. He went to Miami Northwestern. He went to North Fort Myers before that, so we're watching junior year film, and that's what we're seeing on the screen right now. But this is one of those guys that stuck in my head. I first watched him when he committed to Georgia this offseason. He flipped to Texas about 2 weeks later, but ever since I first watched his junior year season, this is one of those guys I've been so excited about to see at the next level. And, you know, in my head this entire offseason, I thought this guy was a 5-star. I thought this guy was rated as a top 5 defensive lineman in the country according to 24/7. Looking at their rankings right now, they have him a bit closer to 25 on one list and then number 8 on another. But, you know, I'll be damned if this guy doesn't have the most upside at an interior defensive lineman position across the entire country. So the reason I'm so excited about James Johnson, I think his explosiveness at 285 pounds is very rare. One of the best first steps for an interior defensive lineman that you'll see at the high school level. And the reason why I get so excited about having that quick twitch explosiveness at the defensive tackle position, a lot of issues that you'll have with high school defensive linemen, it'll be two things. You know, they're not strong enough, they're not heavy enough. Well, those two things are very easy to put on at the next level. It's a lot easier for James Johnson to put on 15 pounds at the next level. It's a lot easier for James Johnson to get a lot stronger at the next level. And honestly, these kids being high school kids, that's when their body does the most growing from high school into college. I mean, everybody had a freshman 15. That's true for college football players as well. But the point I'm trying to make is that first step is something you don't really see improve throughout a kid's high school or throughout a kid's college football career. So I think the fact that he's already got that explosive first step, one of the best in the country in my opinion, as he continues to add weight, as he continues to add strength to his frame. I already think he's a strong football player, by the way. I just think that's why 24/7 has those 320-pound kids rated over him, but I'll be damned if they have a better first step than James Johnson. So I think as he continues to add that strength and weight to his frame, as he continues to kind of mold his game around that explosive first step, he's going to turn into a really good pass rusher. It's going to really help him as a run defender as well. You remember Byron Murphy at Texas, 4 years ago now? A really undersized guy. You know, he was a bit closer to 6 foot, so really small defensive tackle, but he was so effective against the run because of how good that explosiveness was. He was able to play a lot stronger than he actually was because of that first step. So I really think James Johnson has all the upside in the world. This is my favorite interior defensive lineman in the entire 2026 class. You know, we watch a decent amount of recruits on this channel. I'm really high on James Johnson. The next player we're watching is a bit more respected by the websites. Richard Wesley, 6'5", 250-pound edge rusher from Sierra Canyon in California. He's a 4-star according to 24/7, the site that we're using for the graphics you see on the screen right now, but a 5-star according to On3. The reason why some of these websites are so high on him, the reason why Dan Lanning jumped into a pool when he first committed to Oregon before flipping to Texas about 17 days later, to me is the length plus the first step plus the bend. You know, I could keep going, but this guy has all the pass rushing traits that you look for, and then you consider the fact that this is a guy that was originally in the class of 2027, so he's going to be a young football player when he enrolls at Texas, when he walks on to campus in Austin. I really do think this dude has a lot of upside as a pass rusher going forward because of that 6'5", 250 pounds. And as he continues to add weight, we'll talk about his upside as a run defender as well. But yeah, that flexibility that he has is really exciting. There's a guy named Carter Meadows that just signed to Michigan, and he kind of has a similar... they're kind of the similar archetype where they're real long, real fluid athletes that look like basketball players. But the difference between Carter Meadows and Richard Wesley is Carter Meadows has a while to see the field at the next level because he's very spread out. He's a very skinny football player. He's got a lot of upside as a pass rusher. Don't get me wrong. You know, if when you watch my Michigan video, I'll say the same thing about Carter Meadows. Except the difference between Carter Meadows and Richard Wesley is Richard Wesley's a lot closer physically to seeing the field at the next level, and that's really impressive considering that this is a guy that reclassed. So 250 pounds. There's not as much weight that has to get added as there usually is for players that are kind of similar to Richard Wesley, at least in my opinion. He's a very strong football player already, and all the pass rushing upside in the world. And we see that move right there, just how fluid he can turn the corner. Another thing that you see with Richard Wesley that you don't see with a lot of the similar edge rushers to Richard Wesley is the hand usage. A lot of those guys that are real long and real fast, they rely on that length and they rely on that athleticism and that first step to get after the quarterback. Richard Wesley can use that, but he also has some moves and does understand how to use his hands to get after the quarterback. So, yeah, really refined pass rusher already as a guy that hasn't played college football. So I think that's what you get really excited about Richard Wesley. That's why he's a 5-star according to On3. That's why Dan Lanning was so hyped when he first committed to Oregon. Like I said, just to flip to Texas a couple days later. But yeah, really excited about Richard Wesley. So I think with the two guys that we've watched so far, they're kind of easy to project into Texas's depth chart next season and throughout the course of their careers at Texas. James Johnson, certainly an interior defensive lineman, maybe situationally see him in different positions, but for the most part, interior defensive lineman. Richard Wesley, certainly a guy that's an edge rusher at the next level. We can't really do that with Jamarian Carlton because I totally think that what he does at Texas completely depends on the way his body kind of reacts to the strength and conditioning program. And what do I mean by that? I think this guy, if he continues to keep adding weight, he's already 260 pounds. I really think this guy has a lot of upside as an interior defensive lineman. At the same time, if they kind of want to lean into the athleticism that he has, if they kind of want to use that strength on the edge, I do think that we could end up seeing him being an edge rusher at the next level. I just think it completely depends on how much weight he puts on at the next level. So I'm just going to talk about what he does as a football player rather than what he does as an edge rusher, as a defensive tackle. Yeah, so we said with the first step with Richard Wesley was really good, and we saw him really use that to get around the corner, maybe go to the inside. You know, he had a whole lot of pass rush moves. I think with Jamarian Carlton, he uses that first step to turn into power real easy. We'll see that as a power rusher right there, the way that he can kind of turn into a bull rush with that first step, and then against the run as well, the way that he can use that power to make himself a really strong football player. At 260 pounds, he's already a really big edge rusher, you know, a really strong edge rusher. I think it's going to be really interesting to see exactly what he turns into at the next level, because I don't think we can just project him into any specific position. The way I look at it is you're either getting a defensive tackle with plus athleticism, or you're getting an edge rusher with plus strength and plus size. We'll get started with the linebackers now. The first one that we're watching is pretty dang good. Tyler Atkinson, 6'2", from Grayson in Georgia. I just want to watch this first clip one more time. This entire highlight tape, we'll see the instincts that Tyler Atkinson plays with are really good. The way that in the first second of what's going on, he can diagnose what's going on. He trusts his instincts. He's going to put himself in a very good position to make a play. That's only part of it. The rest of it is that actual athleticism to execute on those instincts. Tyler Atkinson has both of those. That's why he's a 5-star according to On3. So this first play, we see that. Watch this. Watch how right now he decides to take an angle on the quarterback. That's the instincts. That's only part of it. Tyler Atkinson also has that top flight athleticism to actually execute on this angle, and he'll just flash into the backfield and make this play on the quarterback for a loss right there. This entire highlight tape, we'll see the first half second either. Tyler Atkinson puts himself in a really good position, and then from there, that's where that top level athleticism comes over. This entire highlight tape, we're going to see the same thing. But yeah, from Grayson in Georgia, this was a big guy for the Georgia Bulldogs to actually land. This is a guy that they've been recruiting since like 8th grade, if I remember right. Really upset when he ended up committing to Texas this offseason, and yeah, been a really big player for one of the best programs, Grayson in Georgia, 6'8" football, one of the best programs in the entire country. Tyler Atkinson's been the heart and soul of this defense for some years now. And what it all is, like I said, the athleticism. To play at the college football level, at the next level, those instincts are one thing. You know, you could get away being a 260-pound linebacker maybe 20 years ago with good instincts. Now, you need those instincts and that athleticism. And a lot of the top, like, 3-star, 4-star recruits, they'll only have one of those. You know, they can see what's going on, and then from there, it's just about developing them into good athletes, or they'll be really good athletes. You'll see a lot of converted safeties move to linebacker, and then it's just kind of about developing those instincts. Those kids have high upside, but to me, with Tyler Atkinson, when you're already getting those two things in one football player at the high school level, at one of the highest levels of competition that you'll find across the entire country, 6A football in Georgia, I really think that this guy has a very high floor and a very high ceiling. It's kind of hard to not seeing him be a really good football player at the next level. But yeah, big time get for Steve Sarkisian in Texas. I think this was a really big guy for Georgia. Is really, really good job actually signing Tyler Atkinson because, big time get for Texas, no doubt about that. The other highly rated linebacker that Texas signed in 2026 is Kwiatkowski, 6'2", 230 from Mayde Creek in Houston, Texas. He's rated pretty similar to Tyler Atkinson, but they are completely different players right now. So with Atkinson, we saw him a lot at that interior linebacker position. He's going to make plays in the box. He has that athleticism to make plays on the perimeter as well. With Apollo, we're going to see him a lot closer to the line of scrimmage as an edge rusher, and I really like his upside as a situational pass rusher at 6'2", 230. That first step is really good. He's a very fluid athlete as well. We saw the way that he could turn the corner. He has a really nice dip move where he can just get around that offensive tackle to the outside and then stick his hand into the quarterback in the backfield. Really good pass rusher. I just think his upside is limited as a run defender at the line of scrimmage. 6'2", 230. I don't think, definitely not day one, you're not going to ask him to consistently set the edge as a run defender, and I think his upside's a bit limited in that regard as well, just because he's 6'2". But if I'm Texas, this is what I do. So we talked about how rare the instincts are with Tyler Atkinson as a high school player. With Kwiatkowski, using him as a situational pass rusher, you don't quite need that same level of instincts at the line of scrimmage. At the linebacker, you were responsible for the entire football field when you really think about it. The edge rusher, it's a bit more responsibility based. You have a pretty set understanding of what you're responsible for. So I think the trick is kind of developing those instincts into Apollo. So on the obvious running downs, you can stick them at inside linebacker and allow that first step that we see right now as an edge rusher. You allow that first step to allow him to crash downhill and then make plays as an inside linebacker on obvious running downs. And then on those obvious passing downs, you can stick him back on the line of scrimmage and let him do what he does best. So I think day one, you're getting a guy that has a lot of pass rushing upside and will bring some juice as a pass rusher. And then the trick is just kind of developing him into a run defender, which I think his upside's higher as an interior linebacker as a run defender. The last guy we'll look at was a late addition for Texas. He was originally committed to California, and he flipped to Texas about 2 weeks ago, and then he ultimately signed with Texas. Rocky Cummings, 6'4", 220 linebacker from Carlsbad, California, and we're going to see him at the edge a lot, and this is a really long football player. You see 6'4" on the screen, and you think that's pretty tall. You just see how long his arms are, I really love having these linebackers with those long arms, not just if they turn into edge rushers. We see them do that a lot at high school, but also really allows them to be better pass droppers. It's very easy to get you don't have to be as fast into your pass drop. You can kind of read run a bit longer, especially on play action with those long arms because you have that length to kind of impede a passing lane. So, yeah, we're going to see him all over the field. We see him at tight end. I'll just skip to this last pass rush rep that we had. Because this looked pretty dang athletic the way he got around the corner on this. But linebacker depth for Texas is a massive need. A lot of guys graduating. Anthony Hill, guy that could go into the draft, and then LaFau as well. I know I just botched his name. LaFau, though, just entered the transfer portal as well, which is a pretty big loss for Texas, to be honest, because he was going to be a big part of the Texas defense. So I do think linebacker depth was a need for Texas in this cycle, and I also think you'll probably see him kind of be a transfer portal priority just because they're very young, very talented at linebacker, but very young at linebacker. So you might see them go portal with LaFau leaving via the portal as well. There we go. That's the length I'm talking about in the pass dropping lanes. You can read run a lot longer. That's a linebacker's primary responsibility, obviously. Watch him just bust ass, and then he uses that length to get into the passing lane. That was beautiful right there. Jermaine Bishop's a 5'11", 155-pound athlete, 5-star athlete from Willis, Texas. A guy that really burst onto the scene as a freshman when DJ Lagway was the quarterback at Willis. So we kind of remember him, He's been around for a while, but he's listed as an athlete for a reason. We're not exactly sure what Jermaine Bishop exactly is going to do at the next level. We just know it's going to be at a high level. I think the highlight tape, the film that we're watching, is so good. He's such a good athlete. There's actually a conversation about this dude being a two-way player at the next level, similar to what Travis Hunter did at Colorado. I don't know how serious that conversation is, but I totally understand it, man. What this dude does with the ball in his hands, this is where we really see that explosiveness into the second level, and really the suddenness as well, the change of direction, the way that he can string all these cuts together in the open field. That translates to the defensive side of the ball. The hips are going to look really good as a cornerback, as a pass defender. And that first step is going to help him in that zone coverage to just crash downhill and make a play on the ball. So I really like his upside as a defender as well. Really like his upside as a receiver. This is the thing with Texas that I'm going to bring up, by the way. They're so loaded in both the receiver and the defensive back rooms with the young freshmen, the young guys. I really love the receivers that Texas brought in last year. Khalil Lockett, Dalen McCutcheon, Jamie French as well. And then the corners, we saw two of them really emerge already. Those receivers haven't emerged yet. I think they're going to emerge sooner rather than later. The cornerbacks already emerged. Grayson Littleton, and then, of course, Cade Phillips as well. Two guys that had great true freshman seasons. So I think that Texas can just ask, they don't have to feel like they have to box Jermaine Bishop into a specific position just because of need alone. I think they're so loaded in the two rooms that we'll talk about Jermaine Bishop playing that they can kind of just put him at whatever they think he'll be best at. Ultimately, that's going to be up to Steve Sarkisian. I wouldn't be surprised to hear if AJ Melwy and PK, the defensive coordinator, get into a fist fight over who wants Jermaine Bishop more, because if I was a DC, I'd want him badly. If I was an offensive coordinator, I'd get really excited about getting this guy the ball. I think ultimately, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not even going to guess, but I do think we'll see a day one impact. I do think you could work him in on offense in certain packages, even if he does play on the defensive side of the ball primarily. I think it's a bit easier to do that, have a guy play defense primarily and then work him in on offense than the other way around. It's not really realistic to have a guy play wide receiver full time and then just on certain situations put him on the defensive side of the ball. So I think more likely it will be that he plays defense and then you might see them work him in on offense. But I do think that we'll talk about a day one impact as a kick returner, a punt returner. I'm so excited for Jermaine Bishop day one, and then really excited to see him turn into a really good football player down the line. He's a really good football player right now. I just think it's going to be really interesting to see how Texas exactly uses as a player of his skill set. But he's going to do whatever he does at the next level at a very high level. I have no doubts about that. I don't think anybody else does. We're now talking about Samari Matthews, a 6'5", 190-pound cornerback from the powerhouse Hugh in North Carolina. And I think with Samari Matthews, I really like this dude in press man coverage. We're going to see some zone clips right now. Really does a good job in zone. I just want to focus on this 2-minute clip that we're going to talk about, is how good the man coverage is. Part of it's the hips. We talk a lot about hip fluidity being an absolute necessity for cornerbacks. That'll get you recruited. I think what gets you excited about Samari Matthews is not only that ability to have that hip fluidity, but also the way that he can react to what the wide receiver's doing. In my opinion, cornerback is the hardest position athletically in football, because you not only have to be as fast as the guy that you're guarding, you have to be able to be as fast as him without knowing what he's running. A wide receiver knows what route he's running. Cornerback has to do that without knowing what he's doing, and we see that on this clip right here. Look at the way that he can just keep reacting to this, and there's never an inch of separation on this wide receiver, even though this dude runs like I want to say a triple move, but honestly it's a bit closer to 5 moves that he runs. And this is a bit of a TikTok route. You're not going to really see receivers in the SEC run this kind of thing, I think, at the next level. Maybe you will, but at the same time, I just think the way that Samari Matthews has that hip fluidity to open to the outside, so if that dude turned it into a go, he was there. Then he turned it into a hitch, so he completely stopped his hips in a half instant, was all over that hitch, and then he tried to turn it into a fade again, and then he was able to open his hips again. There was not an inch of separation the entire time on that. In this entire highlight tape, we see that. I mean, take a look at the hips right there, the way that he can react. When that dude was running an out route, he's just going to flip his hips to the inside, and he's all over that in route as well. Very physical cornerback as well, 6'1". That might seem like a middle of the pack frame, but I think he's a lot longer than that'll lead you to believe. His arm length looks really good. Very physical player as well. I'm not sure if we'll see any run defense highlights. Yes, we will right here. Very physical tackler, and that the physicality shows up as a run defender, but also in that press man coverage. We see that before, and we see that here. Maybe not here, but as a run defender. But we do see the way that he punches on the press man. It really allows him to not have to be as good because he can knock receivers off his route. The good thing with Samari Matthews is he is as good. We see that right here. Look how physical of a corner he is in man as well. The next player we're watching is Hayward Howard Jr., 6'2", 190-pound cornerback from Edna Carr, the powerhouse in Louisiana. When we just watched Samari Matthews, we talked a lot about the man coverage and the hips and the way that he could react to what the wide receiver was going to do. With Hayward Howard Jr., we're going to talk a lot more about the zone coverage and the way that he can crash downhill. Just take a look at this interception right here by the guy that we're watching right now, Howard. Just put yourself in the opposing quarterback's eyes. Pre-snap, if you tell yourself this receiver by the 40-yard line is going to run just a little in or a little hitch, it looks like a big enough cushion. The problem is you have the Texas commit on the other side of the ball, and he's just going to completely pull the trigger on this, come downhill, and he's not only going to get there fast enough to make a play on the ball, he's going to make a play on the ball and intercept it and then make a play into the end zone for a pick six. So that's what that quick trigger really is. It's not only about, actually getting to the mark. It's about kind of fooling the opposing quarterbacks, and I think that's how you can kind of turn bad decisions from quarterbacks into interceptions when you have that athleticism to start in one place and then just completely crash downhill. And also, love the length with Hayward Howard at 6'2", really long corner. We said Samari Matthews did a pretty good job of that in press man coverage. We see that with Howard as well, but we also see it in zone coverage. Really, we talked about it before with Rocky Cummings, I think, the linebacker, but that length really helps you as a zone defender because you can get into that drop a lot later than you would have to be. So Hayward Howard not only has that hip fluidity, we're going to see that in some of the man covers that we see right here, really fluid hips, but also really like his upside as a zone corner as well for Texas. We're now talking about Teray Davis, the 6'1", 185-pound safety from Fairview in Colorado. Conversation about whether he's going to play wide receiver or D-back at the next level. Seem like that Texas is going to play him on the defensive side of the ball as a safety, so we'll talk about him as a safety. The corners that we've watched so far, I don't really think you need an elite 40 time to play corner. That 10-yard athleticism is very important. We talked about that ability to crash downhill. But when you're playing single high safety the way that Teray Davis does, you need that 40 time. You can't really get away without having a really good long speed ability. And I think that's what you get with Teray Davis at that single high safety. We'll see him in zone coverage, not only have the instincts to know where to go. We talked about that with Tyler Atkinson. Look at the athleticism on this to completely undercut this route. It makes it so difficult for quarterbacks to read defenses when you have athletes like this on the back end, because you'll think that a read's open and then all of a sudden Teray Davis is just going to teleport to where you thought that wide receiver is wide open. And we see in this game right here, turns two interceptions that looked open to the quarterback. They're going to turn into interceptions because of that athleticism that Teray Davis has. And yeah, part of it's athleticism. There's great athletes in every recruiting class. We said this at linebacker. The 3 stars are the guys that either have good instincts or good athletic ability. I think that the 4 stars and the 5 stars, like Teray Davis is and Tyler Atkinson is, they have both of those already coming into college. That really top-end athleticism and then the instincts as well. The next thing that we'll talk about is him putting on more weight. 185 pounds at 6'1". He's probably going to be playing a bit more heavy than that. The good news is this dude is a very physical football player. We see that the way that he can crash downhill, the tackles that he makes in the backfield. I really like that long speed as well when he's filling as a run defender. We saw that in zone coverage, the way that he can just have a full range in that back end as a single high, but that also translates to him contributing as a run defender. And yeah, the good news is that, he's a willing tackler. There's a lot of free safeties that just kind of will balk on that responsibility. They won't be as aggressive to get involved. Teray Davis, very aggressive to get involved as a run defender. And we're going to finish up with Yaheem Riley, 5'11", 180-pound D-back from Austin Anderson in Texas. We'll see him lined up as a corner. We'll see him lined up as a nickelback. We'll see him lined up as a single high. Really has good zone instincts as well. He does a good job reading the quarterback's eyes. Zone's so difficult because you have to look at the quarterback while feeling where the wide receivers are. He does a good job, reading what the quarterback's doing and then getting to that wide receiver in his pass, in his zone drops, that is. But yeah, depth guy for Texas. I really like the young talent that Texas has in that D-back room. Not only the guys that we talked about today, but the guys on roster. I know I talked about Cade Phillips and Grayson Littleton before, but also Wardell Mack and Jonah Williams, guys that are so talented. I think that this young group that they have in the defensive back end, including the guys that we talked about today, really excited about what Texas is building in that D-back room. Just giving my final thoughts on the players that Texas just signed on the defensive side of the ball. I think a very talented group, not only that premier talent that's going to contribute early in their college football careers, but I think a lot of really solid depth and guys that can contribute down the line, turn themselves into good college football players down the line. But I think the guy that's going to contribute the most day one, I'm going to go with Tyler Atkinson, just because it could be potentially a lot of guys leaving this Texas linebacker room. Anthony Hill might be a draft guy. A lot of guys graduating, and then Lafu in the transfer portal as well. I do think that there's going to be some depth issues at linebacker in 2026. Now, I think Ty Anthony Smith is a very talented football player. I think Elijah Barnes is very talented as well. I just think that having Tyler Atkinson in that room, he's going to contribute a lot more than other defensive players, I think, in 2026. And the guy with the highest long-term upside, I really want to say Richard Wesley. That's probably the right answer. That's what my mind wants to say. But I really think James Johnson is the guy with the highest long-term upside, just because of how good that first step is. Really good frame as well. So I think that as he continues to add weight and strength, I don't think we'll see a whole lot of James Johnson year one, but certainly down the line, I think James Johnson is going to turn himself into a really good college football player, and then maybe even an NFL player down the line.